What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player. My name is nWJlNzcLdL, and today we finally have some news on Phase 4 Season of Discovery. Now, I know a lot of our most recent discussions have been very heavily focused around the War Within, and I will still be continuing to cover War Within content. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about Season of Discovery again today. But on the note of the War Within, and specifically the War Within beta, if you do have War Within beta access, today, actually, as this video is being posted, I'm going to be spending some time trying to do some dungeons on the War Within beta with viewers. So if you're interested, you can check out my Twitch stream. It'll be twitch.tv/nWJlNzcLdL. That's where I will be broadcasting as we're doing these dungeons together and everything. And there's also a community inside of the War Within beta. If you open up your communities tab on the These Go to 11 server, you can go in there. The invite code is in the description to this video here on YouTube. Just copy and paste that code in there, and that should get you directly into the Sounds Good beta community, which we'll be using to try and populate people to run these dungeons. But anyway, talking about Season of Discovery Phase 4. This phase, I think, is going to be really super important for not just Season of Discovery, but also for the entire future of just Classic as a whole, as well as the concept of Classic Plus. So rather than just going through line by line all of the news and information and the data mining and etc. that's been coming out surrounding Season of Discovery Phase 4, which is now up on the PTR. So there's lots of information coming for Season of Discovery Phase 4. Rather than going through all that line by line, you can go read that on Wowhead if you want. What I wanted to do today is actually just talk about what is the situation that Season of Discovery finds itself in. What are the important things that will need to be true of Season of Discovery Phase 4 to keep it going forward? And what does that mean for the future of the game and for Classic in general, depending on how things go? Now, it's not really a secret that Phase 3 has been kind of fallen a little bit flat. It's been kind of lacking. It hasn't really hit that vibe that a lot of Season of Discovery players were really hoping for, basically ever since Phase 1. Like, Phase 1 came out, people loved it. Phase 2 came out, people went, I wish it was more like Phase 1. Phase 3 came out, and I think a lot of people just sort of ended up like wondering what the heck they were even supposed to be doing. And to be clear, that was a problem even before they announced that Phase 4 was going to be delayed and that Phase 3 was going to be extended longer than they originally expected. Like, even before the news of that delay came out, people were already starting to churn out from Phase 3 of Season of Discovery. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, and we're going to get into some of them here, but ultimately it just kind of boiled down to, for me at least, and for the handful of people I've talked to and some of the people that have been in the guild that I've been running as well, a lot of it just boiled down to there kind of just didn't seem like there was that much to do. Like, Sunken Temple once a week was kind of it for most people. And even then, the fact that it went to a weekly lockout and increased up to a 20-player raid size made it more difficult for people to find groups to do their raiding with than it did previously. A lot of guilds had trouble recruiting. A lot of guilds ended up falling apart because they weren't able to fill their raids and get everything going. And a lot of pugs started having problems, especially like if your free time was later in the week. It was very difficult to find a pug for Sunken Temple because most people had either already done it or they were only looking for people for like the last couple of bosses at that point. So that was a big problem. Incursions were good for leveling, but they lost flavor pretty fast, especially once people sort of figured out like how best and most optimally to go through them. Incursions are actually I wish I'd remembered this for last week's episode. Incursions are a great example of cases where players do somewhat need to be saved from themselves, because the ideal method and the most efficient method for doing incursions was to just do the quests that didn't require you to kill anything and run in a big loop, run back around, share everything again, run in a big loop, run back around, share everything again. And the way the mechanics worked for that whole thing meant that was so annoying and frustrating to actually do. It was just hyper efficient. So a lot of people were doing that, even though it wasn't very fun. And then as I was saying, like, incursions just sort of lost a lot of their flavor over time anyway. It ended up being something that a lot of people just didn't really want to deal with. And then PvP wise, there kind of just wasn't really much that was new to do for PvP. Like, obviously there were the new sets that came in, there were new rewards to earn. But like, if you were someone who was interested in doing like the War Song grind, for example, or even the Arathi Basin grind, you probably already did that in the previous phase. And more Blood Moon was just more Blood Moon. Like, it wasn't really an interesting new event whatsoever. Now, obviously, there were still like plenty of things that could be done. Like, there's always alts. You can level alts. There's professions. A lot of people, myself included, kind of just looked at professions and went, yeah, don't really feel like doing that. There's any number of grinds and any number of like preparations for level 60 as well that could have been done. Obviously, the PvP grinds I just mentioned, if you hadn't already done them, those were things that were available in phase 3 as well. It just kind of felt like there wasn't much purpose to any of it. In fact, I actually I really strongly feel that maybe if they had announced the delay earlier, or that it had just been more clear how long phase 3 was going to last, a lot of those things might have been more interesting for people. As it was, going into this expecting an 8-week phase essentially, and going, okay, well, I could worry about leveling all this and grinding out all this like profession stuff that I could get, but then I know that we're going to get level 60 content immediately afterwards, and who knows what's going to happen at level 60. It felt like there wasn't much point to even doing any of that. It really just came down to, can you clear Sunken Temple? If yes, okay, you can now do the content that's available. There isn't really anything else of any value. Also, if you want to play World of Warcraft, there's 3 other ways that you can play World of Warcraft right now, other than Season of Discovery, between Cataclysm Classic, Mop Remix, and Dragonflight. That just is like the live available, like to everyone, ways to play World of Warcraft right now. So if you want to play World of Warcraft, there's all these different options and different ways that you could be doing that. Season of Discovery kind of ended up being one of the last options on the list. Once, you'd gotten a Hakar kill or 2 in, it kind of felt like you were basically done with the phase. So that leads us to phase 4, where we're now in the situation where it seems like very few people are still playing Season of Discovery. Like, I don't have access to these numbers or anything. I haven't tried to look up any census things online or anything. Those tend to be super inaccurate anyway. But it does seem like there's just not a lot of people playing Season of Discovery at this point, which means that phase 4 is going to be kind of make or break for Season of Discovery. And being make or break for Season of Discovery has far-reaching implications for what that could mean for the continued existence of Classic seasons, as well as the idea of Classic Plus, which so many of us are hoping Season of Discovery is sort of a precursor to. Basically, what I mean by that is, if for whatever reason Blizzard looks at Season of Discovery and went, yeah, it kind of started out good, but then it petered out and people didn't really stick with it over time, there's a very strong possibility that their takeaway from that is people aren't interested in this. There's a very real possibility that the lesson that becomes learned is this isn't what people want. Now, I don't think that's correct at all. I think the problem with Season of Discovery has been, frankly, that Blizzard hasn't put enough resources into it. I know that the Classic team is very small, and that they are really scrambling to try and do as much as they can. And they've been launching Cataclysm Classic on top of this as well. I feel like the ultimate problem here is the Classic team needs more people so that they can do all of these things and do all this stuff that I'm sure they want to be doing. That to me is the core of it. That said, I could totally see the result being they go, well, we tried to do this and we really only could, supply a small team to it. And it wasn't really able to blah, 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 corporate reasons or whatever. And then the end result is, okay, we're going to go back to having our seasons basically just be like 1 or 2 tweaks and then that's it. Or stop doing seasons entirely and also thus give up on the idea of Classic Plus as well. That is the doomsday. That is the worst outcome for this thing that I'm really hoping we don't end up with, because what I would love to see, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to see as well, is the concept of Classic as an MMO, and take all the ideas and the philosophies about what made it be the way that it is and start to do new stuff with that. Start to actually come up with new content for Classic, new things, new ideas, expand on it. And we've seen a lot of that with Season of Discovery so far, but I really want new stories told inside the Classic hierarchy and so on. New things, new ideas, new stuff, not just, let's take ideas from future things. They have done a few new things with runes and so on, and there's been a little bit of story that's been told here. I really want to see them have the opportunity to go just completely ham with it. And there's a strong risk that can never happen if Season of Discovery ends up kind of petering out and not really going where it should. So what does Season of Discovery need for phase 4? What is the important things? What needs to be done and what needs to be nailed to really bring Season of Discovery back into the limelight? There's probably some things that it's probably never going to get quite back to where it was with phase 1, but I do have some ideas and some things that I'm really hoping that we see in phase 4, some of which there's already some good indications that they might be heading in that direction. So the biggest thing that I want to talk about here though, is they somehow need to find a way to bring back that magic of phase 1, bring back that feeling of it's classic and it's familiar, but there's interesting new things that are going on. Some of that is probably already out of the box. Like that ship has already sailed and somewhat sunk at this point. The fact that they have a PTR this time is also kind of an indication that maybe like the completely hiding thing. Oh, you're not going to know what runes you've got until the thing actually comes out, and then you'll go and discover them, even though that has literally never happened. It feels like Blizzard has kind of stepped away from that. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that in this case, like, especially as we're now getting into level 60 content, I think the benefits of having a PTR outweigh the little bit of spoiler that, let's be honest, most people were just going to look up anyway at this point. That's going to come as a result of that. So the PTR, that makes sense to me. That said, I do have some ideas on other things that they could do to help bring some of the discovery back. One thing is the idea of making all of the class-specific runes be solo discoverable. And by that, I mean you do not need to look anything up. As long as you're wandering around in the open world and going to where quests are and generally doing things, you will find something that will set you on the path to finding at least a couple of those runes. It doesn't need to be the case where everyone finds all of them, but like if you're outdoor questing and that's how you level from level 50 to 60, the expectation should be that you can have looked nothing up and still find a couple of runes. And the way that that would need to be accomplished, first of all, just for at least for these runes, don't do any of the like, oh, the idea behind this is that an entire class Discord works together to figure out where it is. That's great if you're in a class Discord and you just like having other people tell you where things are anyway, because that's, let's be honest, that's still the experience for the vast majority of those people. It's not so great if you're trying to encourage players to go out and find things for themselves and go out and discover things for themselves. What I would like to see is have them in a, like, have things in a bit more zones, right? Have like in phase 1, for example, if you were a paladin, there were like 2 or 3 different ways that you could get some of those runes. And the same was true of every class, because they knew that people were going to be starting from different areas. So they put these runes in different spots so that way you were more likely to have come across them, because like the first 2 or 3 zones were pretty much dictated by what race you were playing. They can still do that. Like that can still be a thing. You can still be like, okay, they might go quest over here or they might go quest over here. Let's just put something in both of those zones. Just do it twice. Or at the very least, have something, if it's got to be in one zone because you don't want to build the same like quest chain twice or whatever, have something in the other zone that indicates that you should be going to the one. There's just ways to breadcrumb that sort of thing and ways to give little hints so that you at least are coming across things out in the wild and finding things and going, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that leads to something, which then you can follow. Now, one of the biggest reasons that I think this approach could work and make a lot of sense for phase 4 is that there are also these like utility runes that are being added. These are things that just give you some passive stat benefit from the sounds of things, where it's like a bit more weapon skill or a bit more spell hit and stuff like that. And these are ring slot runes. And these are the sort of thing that multiple classes are going to want to find where these come from. They're going to want to figure out, okay, where can I actually get these things? And there's so many different classes that are going to want to find these. And also there's something that's not really like necessary for just general gameplay. This is really more of a min-max, like I'm really starting to get very hardcore about this, so I need to get this little bit of extra weapon skill sort of thing. Those I think would be totally fine to leave as the bunch of people work together to eventually figure out how to access this rune sort of thing. Let the class specific ones where it's just granting a new ability or something fun and flavorful, let those be things that every single player can expect with a small amount of effort, as long as they're doing stuff in the outdoor world, that they're going to find these. Now, what about not the outdoor world? What about dungeons and stuff? I actually think that the discoveries that are found inside dungeons, or the potential for discoveries inside dungeons, has been kind of a miss so far in Season of Discovery. A lot of times it's either part of some class rune that then takes you elsewhere and you have to do some other stuff and get super convoluted, like the one priest one with all the statues in Scarlet Monastery. That was overcomplicated. I don't know why that was the one that's particularly stuck out to me, but it was one of those like, oh God, there's so much to this. And you're going to come across these things inside the dungeon and you're not going to know what's going on. You don't really know what's going on. Anyway, there were so many people that like the little white items that dropped, the like white quality items that dropped inside Scarlet Monastery, they were like, what the heck is this even for? And then eventually found out it was a priest rune and they were just disappointed because they'd had so many of them at that point. And even then they weren't even needed for the priest rune. They were just a hint. That said, I think there's potential for some in-dungeon discoveries. One thing that happened in phase 3 where we were doing, I was basically leveled through Zul'Farrak for most of it. I don't remember if I swapped to Zul'Farrak or front. I don't remember. Anyway, we spent a lot of time in Zul'Farrak when I was leveling for phase 3. And we came across the like ancient spider. I forget the exact name of it, but the big spider inside Zul'Farrak that they added. And the first time we came across that, we were all so excited. We were like, ooh, there's something new. There's actually something new in the dungeons this time. This is exciting. And we were like, we spent so much time trying to figure out what we needed to do inside that dungeon to make this spider be something, like either make it do something or make it be attackable or any number of things that it could have been. And then eventually we decided, okay, whatever it is, it's probably not something that we can just do right now because we tried so many different things. And then we later were somewhat disappointed to find out that it came from, okay, you have to go and do a quest chain that starts in Felwood before you can come and fight this spider. And the reason that was disappointing wasn't necessarily that the like quest chain to then go and fight a spider was inherently a bad idea. It was more that it would have been so cool in that moment to have found a thing, and then as the group of the 5 of us that were there, work together, put our brains together, and figure out how to do the thing without having to resolve or rely on external information that was gained by somebody else going and doing this thing. And not every discovery needs to be a rune either. Like they can totally have discoveries that's just some little cosmetic thing or just some little like bit of lore or whatever. Like it doesn't all have to lead into something that I then equip on my character in some way that makes me stronger. When I'm thinking about this, I'm actually thinking about way back in Wrath of the Lich King, there was this higher learning achievement. And all you got from doing it basically was there were these random spawn books all throughout the Wrath of the Lich King Dalaran. And as soon as one was read, it would then despawn and it would not respawn for a while. And they spawned in a whole bunch of different places around the map. And if you figured out where they all were and you looked for them long enough and you eventually managed to read all of these books, you got sent in the mail another book, which teleported you to a hidden room inside Dalaran that no one else had access to. And inside that, you could talk to, I think it was Archmage Vargoth was in there, and you got like a pet or something as a result of it too. This was all just like literally like looking around. Oh, there's a book. I wonder what's that about. And it's like, it's tied to this achievement. Obviously you could look up the achievement and see what you needed, but that didn't tell you where everything was. And so you were able to, if you really put yourself to figuring this out, you were able to get access. It was literally just another room. Like that was it. You just went in there and you could hang out in there, and other people who had done this could also hang out in there. So it was kind of a cool, like little secret club off to the side sort of thing. That sort of stuff would work just fine as a discovery sort of thing inside Season of Discovery. We don't need everything to thus be something that increases my character power in some way. It doesn't all need to be like some crazy ridiculous. In fact, a lot of the things they keep putting as like toys that drop off of bosses. Personally, having them be toys that drop off of bosses is kind of a miss for me. I would much rather have that be something that's like, let's hide this somewhere, and let's put some breadcrumbs out there that can lead players to eventually figuring out how to get this thing. That sort of stuff would be great rewards for discoveries that aren't runes. But aside from the whole discovery thing, like I said, I feel like the discovery aspect of Season of Discovery is kind of not really a thing anymore anyway. I think the most important thing for Season of Discovery in Phase 4 is just making sure that there's stuff to do with a reason outside of raiding. They need to really like sit down and think hard. I hope they've already done this because it's a bit late at this point, but really think hard about how Molten Core as a 20-player raid instance not only functions as a 20-player raid instance, but also interacts with all of the other content that's available. There's so much content at level 60 in the classic like archetype, even aside from things like, Blackrock Depths and some stuff that we've already sort of been poking at a little bit in Phase 3. There's Stratholme, Scholomance, there's Blackrock Spire, there's Dire Maul. There's all these different dungeons, and they did list off all these dungeons in their blog and said that they were working on updated rewards for them. So I'm hoping that means that they're committing to this. They're actually making sure that there's a reason to go and do these dungeons. Even if you are already like fully sunken temple geared and so on, I really hope that there's a reason to do all of this content, because having things to do outside of raid day is so important for the health of a guild and health of everything else. And the other thing that I really, really hope eventually, I don't know how much I hope this will happen. Please stop worrying about 40-player raids. Just stop it. Just don't. Like, I know that I know that there's an audience for 40 player raiding inside Classic. I know that those people exist, and I mean no ill will towards the people who like 40 player raids in Classic whatsoever. I don't think they fit for Season of Discovery in the slightest. I think so much of what's been happening in Season of Discovery, and so much of what you can watch, like the trend of the people who were around at first and then the people who quit, so many of them were the people who were really excited about getting like puggable content, like easy stuff that they could do. They could log in, they could play more or less when they felt like it. They could find a little group of people to play with. They didn't need a massive group of so many people that you can't really like know everyone. They liked having their smaller, more intricate groups. And then as we've been working toward, like, I don't think Sunken Temple should have been 20 players, by the way, for the record. I even seem to recall saying something along these lines back when it was first announced as well. I think the whole logical step that they've been taking of, well, we're eventually going to make you do 40 player raids, so we should start pushing you towards 20 players in the meantime. I think that's backwards. Because that literally started with them saying, yeah, people have been really enjoying 10 player raids, but that's going to end eventually. So you should be prepared for that. No, just let 10 players continue to be a thing. I don't have a problem with 20 players at all. And in fact, I'm excited for 20 player Molten Core. I do think there needs to be a lot more focus on 10 player content that goes alongside of it, though. There needs to be a lot more of that smaller group, more like easily puggable, more easily put together. The content that you can have a guild that is only 10 people and they still have stuff to do. They still have things that they can go and accomplish that feels like progression for them. I think that sort of stuff is really, really super important. Now, I will say I do like the concept of the, like, it's tuned for 20 players, but you can bring 40 stuff that they've been talking about with the new instance versions of Kazakh and Azure Ghosts that they were talking about, where they said, this is tuned for 20 players, but you can bring up to 40. That I have less of a problem with, mostly because it means that, like, if you're a tight-knit group, like you're a raid group and you're doing Molten Core, you can take that same raid group and go do Kazakh, go do Azure Ghost. You'll still be able to do it that way. But if you are a pickup group and you're like, okay, this boss is too hard for just like for us to just take 20, or, you know, it's just safer for us to bring more people, you can do that. You don't have to. It's not required to kill the boss, but you can just bring extra people. You can pack the raid full as many people as you want, and thus that way know that the boss is at least going to die. Does lead some questions of like, okay, what does that mean for loot distribution? Like, if 40 people go to this, like, am I still only going to want to do it in the 20 player instance version? But there's some interesting beginnings of a thought there that I'm curious to see how that works out in practice. I will add that when they were talking about in the blog, when they were talking about Onyxia, they said Onyxia is for 40 players or less, which normally I would think is the same thing as what they're talking about with Kazakh and Azure Ghost, but it was like literally the next sentence. Like, it was Kazakh and Azure Ghost, they're tuned for 20, but you can bring 40. Also, Onyxia is for 40 players or less. So not the exact words, but that was pretty much how it came across, which makes me wonder what the heck they actually mean by that. Like, is this also something that is only tuned for 20 players? Like, I'm sure they're doing some amount of tuning on Onyxia. They're probably not just leaving it as it was. If they were leaving it as it was, then it probably is 20 player content, because with all the extra power and everything that's going on, that like you probably do it with 10 players at that point. And honestly, back in the day, I know a lot of Onyxia pugs would you only bring like 25 to 30 people anyway, because the more people you brought, the more likely it was for people to get feared into whelps. So I don't know. I'm not sure what they mean yet with Onyxia in that case. I guess we'll have to wait and see. The other thing that I'm really hoping to see, I don't know if this is necessarily a make or break thing for a Season of Discovery Phase 4, but one thing that I'm really hoping to see in this phase, as they're going through and updating all these encounters and so on, is just get the raid comp requirements under control. They've been all over the place. Like, in Sunken Temple had several fights that only needed one tank and one fight that needed 0 tanks. And I know that's a very like classic way of doing things, but Blizzard, I need you to understand, you added 4 tank specs in Season of Discovery. There's a lot of people who want to play tanks. So to have content that is unique to this unique to this version of WoW, in which all of these tank specs were added and people want to play those specs, that just says, nah, sorry, you don't get to play like that. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I don't like that at all. That feels a bit gross. So please, like, personally, in my opinion, there should not be in anything other than 5 player content there should not be any single tank fights. They should all be 2 tanks or higher. And tanks can do more than just taunt swap. They can also handle adds. They can also split damage amongst each other. They can all, like, there's so many different ways that having multiple tanks on an encounter has been handled over the years that I would really love to see a little bit more of that creativity coming into how tanks are approached in the raids coming in Season of Discovery Phase 4. On top of that, I will also throw this one out there. If you need a quarter of your raid to be 2 specific classes, that fight is bad. I'm talking about the council, whatever they were called, the 6 bosses. That was the 3rd boss of Sunken Temple. The fact that you needed 5 of your raid to either be a priest or a hunter in order to crowd control all these ads that came out, that's dumb. Don't do that. It makes pugging things very difficult. It makes, like, most groups that didn't have that number of classes just ended up having 1 or 2 of them just running around, or like, oh, we'll just off tank this one. It's just gonna, like, just makes the fight way harder in that sense. Just please consider the fact that I don't care how cool the idea is for the raid. Like, if it's gonna make it obnoxious for people to put the group together, just try and keep that a little bit more under control, I guess is what I'm asking. All that said, though, these are things that I'm hoping to see in at least some of this to come to fruition in Season of Discovery Phase 4. And like I was saying, there's a lot of it that I actually think they're on track for. So I'm still very optimistic and very hopeful. I'm really looking forward to Phase 4 dropping. I have to figure out what character I'm going to play because, I don't know, I might switch off the hunter. There's some weird stuff going on with hunters right now. I need to get on the PTR and mess around with it a little bit and see how I feel about it. But also at the same time, they're finally giving feral druids an AoE. So that's long overdue. But finally, there will be a reason to play a feral druid other than just giving Wind Fury to your party if you're Alliance. So I don't know. I still have to figure that out, but I'm still very optimistic and excited for the season. And I'm really looking forward to getting back in there and digging back into it. We'll just have to see what the longevity of it ends up being like. And if this is something that proves, yes, Classic Plus is something that Blizzard can deliver on and people really want to see, or is it just one of those cases? It's going to be one of those cases like, yeah, we had a cool idea and it just kind of fell off towards the end. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, however you experience this show. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't yet, please do check out my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Devilore. Got a bunch of fun perks over that way. So please do check it out and give it a look. You can also go to devilore.com and pick yourself up some Sounds Good merch. I have a couple of ideas for some new products that I want to add to that store sometime in the near future. And if you have any thoughts on things that you'd like to see, please let me know. I'd love to hear any thoughts or ideas on different bits of Sounds Good merch that might be exciting to anyone out there that's not currently available. That's going to be it. Thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you next time.